What does this picture, and this picture all have in common? Let's find out on Celebrating Aviation with Mike Mashat. What these three pictures, actually, I'll throw in a fourth for good measure. What these images all have in common is that they represent aircraft built by Airbus and its legacy company. We're going to be talking about painting the aircraft of Airbus. Before we get into tonight's program, I want to mention that we have some very exciting news. The first airliner show in LA since COVID is being held on Saturday, January 20th next year at the Embassy Suites, south side of LAX. Here's all the information. I'll leave this on the screen for a moment if you want to freeze and look at it. But we're going to provide a link in the title block, and we'll show you a link in a moment. This is the email address, and this will take you to the show's organizer, a gentleman named Mike Chu, who is a longtime dear friend and very devoted airliner enthusiast. He's based in San Francisco, and he'll be running the show. Again, we'll have a link in the title block. Mike is an outstanding photographer as well. This is one of his photos of a Hawaiian Airbus A330. And this serves as a perfect introduction to our program tonight because we're going to be talking about the relationship between photography and artwork in depicting airliners. Specifically, this goes back to post-war years where airliners were shown over locales that represented the airline destinations. In many cases, a painting like this by the great R.G. Smith would be given to the airline upon delivery of its first airplane, in this case, a DC-950. In some cases, they'd have an illustration that would honor the president of the airline. This is a George Okamoto illustration honoring Freddie Laker on the delivery of his first DC-10 Skytrain. So I had been illustrating airliners going back to my days at McDonnell Douglas in the late 1970s. And I was in negotiation for a series of paintings for Airbus as a freelance illustrator. On a Sunday night in 1993, I took my family out to dinner at a Chinese restaurant here in LA, and I got a fortune cookie that had the following message: "You will soon receive good news from a foreign land." Lo and behold, that was a Sunday night. Monday morning, 10 o'clock, the phone rang, and I was informed that I had won the contract to paint a series of airliners for Airbus. Now, this is a photo of the hangar at Toulouse where the Caravels were built, Sud Aviation. This photo was taken in the late 1950s, and it's ironic because this very hangar became the headquarters for Airbus. The company was established in 1970. It was a consortium of 5 European companies from the countries you see here, and these were the organizations that were amalgamated to form Airbus Industry. Today, the company employs more than 125,000 people around the world, has numerous plants around the world, and they build commercial airliners, helicopters, tankers, airlifters, space launch vehicles, and spacecraft, not to mention a world record-holding sailplane. But the story really begins with this airplane, the A300. And this was a stroke of brilliance by the company because it filled a niche that was ignored by U.S. manufacturers, and that is a twin-aisle, wide-body, twin-engine airplane. There was a restriction, however. In those days, the ETOPS, or the rules governing overwater operations with twin-engine airplanes, dictated that they must remain within, at that time, 30 minutes, 45 minutes of land in the event of an engine shutdown. But this allowed Eastern to fly the airplane from New York to Florida and not have to hug the coastline of the U.S. on the way down. Eastern was the first U.S. manufacturer to fly the U.S. airline, to fly the airplane. But what was amazing about this is the marketing acumen of Airbus. They fit this airplane in the gap between the single aisle first generation jets like the 707 and DC-8 and the new jumbo jets like the 747, DC-10, and L-1011. And the 300 became a very successful airplane. 10 years later, the smaller sibling, the A310, made its debut. This has a different wing, upgraded engines, and it was flown in the U.S. by Pan Am and Delta. The A320 became kind of the star of the show. 1987, it was its first flight, and this was Airbus's first single-aisle twin-engine jet. And it had a number of very special distinctions. Before we get into this, I'd like to dedicate this program to anyone out there that just qualified as a captain on the A320. If you've just done that, this program is dedicated to you. But the A320 was the first airliner with full-use fly-by-wire digital flight control system, and technically the first fly-by-wire airliner was Concorde. But the A320 had all three axis, and all the systems were operated by fly-by-wire digital technology. A320 was the first airliner with side stick controllers, first with fully integrated cockpit displays, and it was the first member of Airbus's single-aisle airliner family. And that is composed of these four airplanes: the A318, 19, 20, and 21. In 1992, the A330 made its flight, and this is a very interesting and very innovative system for designing an airliner, because a year earlier, the A340 had made its flight. And what this was different fuselage lengths, and the same wing. You could order it as a twin-engine or a four-engine airliner, depending on the range requirements and suitability to the airline. So the Airbus A340-600 that you see here has the distinction of being the, at that time, longest ranged airliner flying. The 777-300ER came close, but the Airbus that you see here was the first airliner to have the distinction of being able to fly between, get this, any two cities on Earth. The current generation Airbus, the A350 extra wide body, flew in 2013. And in 2005, the A380 double-deck 600-passenger Super Jumbo made its debut. So here you have all the Airbus airplanes in a nice aerial family portrait. And my first assignment was to paint a United Airlines A320 flying over Chicago. And I thought this was really interesting. United became the first U.S. airline to fly the Airbus A320. And history repeated itself, because United was the first airline to fly a European jet airliner in the U.S. in 1961 with the Caravelle. A really beautiful airplane, elegant-looking rear engine, the first jet airliner to have engines mounted on the aft fuselage. And guess where they flew it? New York to Chicago. So how does one go about making a painting of a jet flying over a location from scratch? Well, we start with models. And I'm showing here figure models because this is the same methodology. These are three figures that are setting up a scene for an arriving airline passenger. The gentleman in the center there is famed illustrator Nick Galloway, and that's his wife Marilyn on the right. And they're posing for a scene that's going to be painted by Ren Wicks at Group West here in LA. But just the way you see figure models, I'm using an airplane model. This is a Pacific Miniatures A320 1/100 scale. And there's just one little thing. Airbus requested that I paint the left side of the airplane. So there it is. If you look in the lower left, you can see the shadow of me taking this picture. I needed a photo of the skyline of Chicago. And I remembered from previous trips that on the base leg to runway 27 at O'Hare, if you're sitting on the right side of the airplane, you can see the city. Well, I had a dear friend, that is Craig Cadera, who was a co-pilot for American Airlines. Sadly, we lost him to cancer 3 years ago. But Craig had a Chicago trip, and I said, listen, if your captain is okay with it, if you could just shoot a shot of the skyline on base leg, that would really get me what I need for the painting. And so he obliged, even zoomed in and got some detail. So with Craig's photos and pictures of the model, I was able to produce this painting of the United A320 in the new, at that time, new color scheme. Next was an A319 for United, and this was going to be shown at the San Francisco maintenance base. And that is the facility there, taken from across the airport. And of course, I would edit this to compose a painting. But it all started with this box top, believe it or not, this 1961 kit of The SAS Caravelle from Revell was an inspiration. I love the coloration. I just love the scene, the juxtaposition of the airplane taking off and the ones on the ground. This is, of course, the great Jack Lenwood. Always had this painting in the back of my mind. Someday I would do something like this, and this was the opportunity. In high school, I did my own version, of course, a United Caravelle in that same scene, and this is Prismacolor pencil. But taking the coloration and the staging, I produced the painting for Airbus that looked like this. And there's the maintenance base, and the original of this painting was a 30 by 40 oil on canvas hung in the headquarters building for the maintenance facility, which you see at the extreme left side of the painting. Next was Air Canada, which actually was the first North American airline to fly Airbus aircraft. And first up was the A340, which they were going to use to fly to Asia. And so here you have a European consortium building a airliner for Canada to be flown to Japan. It's a truly international image. Next was the A319, and we wanted to show this over in Niagara Falls to commemorate the U.S.-Canadian relationship and cooperation. And an interesting phenomenon, I learned about this when I was researching the painting. Check this out. The American flag on the American side is flying to the right. The Canadian flag on the Canadian side is flying to the left. How is that possible? Well, I learned that the falls create a low pressure area in the center, and the flags are then drawn into that, and so they're flying in opposite directions. Of course, that's the Maid of the Mist, the little sightseeing boat. They asked that be included in the painting as well. This was very well received. Federal Express A300-600 freighter. This project took me to Disney World in Orlando, Florida, specifically Space Mountain. Federal Express sponsored the Space Mountain ride. They even had a feature called Freight in Space, if you can believe that. And they had a VIP lounge in this attraction. And so I was commissioned to paint a triptych, which are 3 panels that are related and that would hang in the lounge. And so we started with the nose section of the A300-600 freighter. We did a piece on the engine with the FedEx logo, and a similar piece on the tail with, again, the FedEx logo. And these 3 paintings hung in that lounge area and were very effective. Back to Air Canada, the A319 retrojet. What's a retrojet? Well, that's where we go with a legacy airliner. We take the original markings and we apply it to a new airplane. And this was in commemoration of Air Canada, or Trans-Canada Airlines' 60th anniversary. Additionally, they wanted me to add the first airplane they ever flew, which was the Lockheed 10 Electra. So, using the A319 in those colors and the Lockheed 10 and a nice cloudscape, I was able to produce this. Also, at that time, I did the A330 shown over the Canadian Rockies. And final project, U.S. Airways A319 over National Airport in Washington, D.C. And why National? Well, because Crystal City, which is adjacent to National Airport, is the headquarters for U.S. Airways. So I needed an aerial shot of the airport. So what do? Well, you get a helicopter. We chartered this Robinson R-22 from a company in Frederick, Maryland. They flew down and picked me up. And the idea was that I would take off and fly out to the east over the Potomac and circle back and take a shot of the airport. Well, that took less than a minute, probably about 45 seconds in the air to climb to altitude. There's the money shot. You can see Crystal City in the distance. And I had everything I needed, so it was a case of heading back. However, the company charged a 1-hour minimum, so I had the helicopter for an hour. Well, as we were turning back for the airport, President Clinton at that time was heading out to Andrews Air Force Base in Marine One, the helicopter, and the airspace over the center of the city was closed. So I got to use that almost the entire hour in a low altitude sightseeing flight around the Beltway to get back to National Airport. Turned out pretty cool. And there's the painting. 319, Crystal City in the background, Washington National, Washington Monument, and again, a very effective painting for a delivery of a new airplane. U.S. Airways changed their markings to this. If you saw the movie Sully and know the story of Miracle on the Hudson, these were the markings on the A320 that went into the river with everyone surviving. Tell me in the comments which color scheme you like better, the delivery or the this U.S. Airways scheme. And gosh, it was a great association. I enjoyed working with the wonderful folks at Airbus. They were so cooperative and creative in conveying the scenes that they wanted me to paint. It was a wonderful association, and I remember it very fondly. However, the paintings gave way to digital artwork, and that is the method used today. But I'd like to close with a quick recap of what airline builders were happening in the world in that time period, going back to the beginning of the jet age. This is a list of the major manufacturers in 1960. This doesn't count the regional jets and things of that nature. But look what happens in 10 years' time. And again, we're talking the major airline manufacturers. Airbus was the new kid, just being formed. And then you had the big three in the US. By 1983, Airbus was number 2. And I'm including here Bombardier and Embraer because they were making quite a large contribution with their regional jet airliners. And today, you have Airbus, Boeing, and Embraer. So there you have it, a look at what it was like being an artist for Airbus Industry and creating images of new airliners to be given during delivery ceremonies. I'd like to thank the great folks at Airbus and Mr. George Hamlin, who coordinated and helped make all this possible. And I want to thank you for celebrating aviation with Mike Machat. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We enjoy bringing them to you. If you haven't subscribed, we'd love having you on board. Please do hit the like button on the way out. That helps us with YouTube. As always, until next time, take care.